It's time once again to slip into your camo, grab your bow, and join us out in the field for another episode of the Up North Journal, presented by PSE Archery. The Up North Journal crew is knocked and ready to rock for another exciting adventure. So let's step outside and hit the trail.
This episode of the Up North Journal podcast is brought to you by PSE Archery,
Scentlock Technologies,
Scent Blocker,
Rambo Bikes,
Hunter's Blend Coffee,
Limwalker Game Calls,
Stanislawski Releases,
Copper John Sights,
Easy Cut Outdoor Products,
Fourth Arrow Camera Arms,
Wind Sense Hunting Sense,
X-Stand Tree Stands,
Spot Shooters,
and Twisted Mind Bowstrings.
And don't forget you can catch us in syndication at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on goodtalkradio.com. Welcome back to the Up North Journal podcast, everybody. Host Mike Adams, Dan DeFoss sitting in a warm cabin in mid-Michigan.
It is a warm cabin, considering it's, from what my phone tells me, 7 degrees outside.
A balmy 7, huh?
A balmy, compared to the real feel this morning of minus 20-something.
All right. Well, hopefully you got your base layers on.
All right, absolutely. You know, it's that time of year. I guess it's January, so I guess we got to enjoy winter, right?
Right. You know, and I don't want to take too much time away from the podcast today. We came back from ATA. We told you guys that we were going to be making announcements today. If you watch the monitor behind us, you'll see some of the great companies that we were working with, like the one right there, right now.
Right, and we got a first-time listener on Facebook.
All right,
Brian Kleins.
Thanks for joining us, Brian.
Absolutely.
Well, I tell you what, let's get right into this because we got a lot of good stuff to talk about. And we have got none other than Chris Kreiner on, a predator hunter from over in Portland, Michigan.
And no better time to talk about predator hunting than after all the seasons are done, except that one is still open.
That's right. Chris, you still there? Can you hear us?
Yes, sir. How's it going today, Mike and Dan?
Hey, good. No sir here, man. Don't say sir. we're all buds.
You can call him sir. He's nice and old. So
hey now, don't be going down that road. But you're over there in Portland, Michigan, and you do a lot of predator hunting. We've seen a lot of really cool stuff that you've been up to lately, and we just kind of wanted to have you on and talk about thinning out the yotes here in Michigan. We've got a problem at our camp, and I know Dan's got the bigger critters up there where he's at in the UP.
I got to select all of them
that are cousins to the
right.
coyotes. But, talk a little bit about what you guys, you run with a crew, and we've seen some really good video from you guys. Talk a little bit about coyote hunting here in Michigan. What do you guys do?
Well, I'm part of a small group called Nocturnal Adrenaline. It's a group of guys primarily around the Iowa County, Eaton County, Clinton County area. We go around, farmers are contacting us, other hunters are contacting us to hunt their land because they have a problem with coyotes. Obviously, farmers, the biggest thing is the predation on their cattle, the calves, and then you got lambs also. Coyotes are just brutal. If you see them on the scouting cameras, there's a few photos and videos going around online of these coyotes just attacking deer and attacking, all sorts of animals. There's one farmer in the area. He put a scouting camera over top a coyote den one spring, and that den alone brought in 11 fawns. So the devastation on the deer herd is just huge. So it's been a lot of fun getting out there, and some of the techniques that we use at night allows us to really hit an area, call these coyotes in, and get a lot of response. So good times, that's for sure.
Well, you talk about farmers, and most of the people, I would say most of the people that listen to the show or watch the show here are hunters. And that's probably one of the aspects that a lot of us really don't think about is the fact that they do devastate farmers, whether they have chickens, cattle, pigs, whatever, lambs. Is that primarily most of the places you're hunting are farms because of that?
Yeah, we got a good number of farms that the biggest issue is, they're getting into the pastures and they're harassing the cattle. And farmers, time and time again, are calling us about issues on these farms. So being able to, I guess I can go back, the rules changed about 3 years ago.
Okay.
There's a small group of guys, the Center Fire at Night guys, that petitioned the state for the use of center fire rifles at night. And so once that happened, that allowed us to be a lot more efficient in the fields, extended our ranges just a little bit, and then plus it flat out knocks coyotes down versus using a 22 Magnum or 17 HMR, when you can use calibers such as a 223 or 22-250, and obviously there's quite a range of calibers that can be used, up to .269 diameter. So your 6.5 Creedmoor still fits into that classification, and it allows you to be just very effective in the fields. And now, obviously, being ethical, knocking down the animal, dispatching it as quickly as possible is the ultimate goal, and these calibers do that. So,
and looking at that, before that happened, I mean, what was your primary firearm of choice? Was it a 22 mag or 17 HMR or shotgun?
Well, to be honest, I actually didn't do any nighttime hunting up until the switch of the law. My hunting used to primarily be during the day because a centerfire rifle was what I wanted to use. Right. So I really wasn't much of a nighttime hunter. So now that the law has changed, it's actually brought a lot of people out of the woodwork. There's a lot more nighttime hunters out there, and the gear that we're using is helping out a lot. Yeah,
actually, I'm showing a piece of video right now, the one you've got labeled Good Night. You got the 2 coyotes out it looks like a cut cornfield. And the video quality of what you guys are using, to me, is just simply amazing.
Yeah, my AR right here behind me, we can go a little bit more into that later, but I got that mounted up with a thermal optic rifle scope, and that allows me to see the heat detection. And what I did have mounted on that was a night vision scope, which is the video that you're showing now. That was night vision. Scope called the Pulsar N355, and the quality of the night vision has come a long way from what it used to be. And in this particular scenario, this was a September hunt. The farmer had just taken out, about a 75-yard wide section of silage, and he chopped the field. And those coyotes showed up in 10 seconds.
Really?
Yeah, we turned on the collar. They might have been watching me walk the collar out, and but took the collar out, and just flipped on a male coyote howl, and they popped out of the cornfield at 50 yards. We had a first-time hunter with us for that hunt, and he wasn't quite sure what to expect. And when they all popped out, I let him take the first shot, and that's when you see the coyotes jump. And then I take the second shot, and I drop the second coyote, and then he took a shot at the third coyote and missed it. But it was one of those hunts, it's very memorable when you can pull off hunts like that.
Absolutely. Talking about taking a first-time hunter out and being able to get them hooked that quick, man. Right? That's awesome. So,
well, there's guys that it is. I mean, coyote hunting is one of the most frustrating and rewarding sports, I guess you could say. I absolutely love it. At first, it was a struggle. When I first started daytime hunting, probably about 20 years ago, you would go maybe you'd call in a coyote 1 out of 12 to 14 sets.
Okay.
And so it's very time consuming, and it just became very frustrating. And I think that's what a lot of coyote hunters now are running into is how do you get started? Where do you go? And they're getting frustrated because there's guys that are 2 to 3 years into this and still haven't taken their first coyote.
Right. Well, so in looking at that, I actually had a guy hit me up on Twitter this week and was asking about that. He's just getting started in getting a call, going out at night and hunting. How do you kind of set up without I don't want you to give away all your tricks, but for a first timer, what would be a way to get them out there on a call and get them going?
Well, for a first timer, especially if you're hunting at night, I have questions every week, guys asking me, how are you setting up? What sounds are you using? And one thing that I tend to do is I don't sit anywhere near fence rows. I don't go anywhere near the wood lines. I stay right out in the middle of the field.
Okay.
On a full moon night, okay, you're going to have to switch it up a little bit because a full moon, they'll see you from a few hundred yards out. But when it's pitch dark out, you got a new moon, stand right out in the middle of the field or sit, whatever your preference is. And distress sounds you almost can't go wrong with, especially this time of year. They're hungry. And until you understand the coyote vocals, what are you talking to them with? How are they responding? It really isn't recommended to go into a ton of vocals unless you're just going out and locating some dogs for possibly hunting later in the night. you know that they're there, they responded, go out there and hit them up with a distress call possibly later. Because you have your invitational howls, you have your, like you're saying, your locator howls, and then you get aggressive. You got your fights, you got your challenge howls, and knowing how and when to use those is, I guess, ultimately comes down to experience. I started off, I guess, when I first started predator hunting, your Ed Seary and your Randy Andersons of the predator world are who I looked up to when I first started getting into it. I learned a lot from those guys, popping in a VHS tape back in those days and just watching those guys. It's just really impressive to see where they've come today.
Right.
And I mean, coyotes are spread completely across the country, and a lot of guys have a lot of success doing this.
Yeah. But, well, looking at that, you're talking about going back to VHS days. I mean, we're kind of dating ourselves here, I guess, saying that we are a little bit older. We remember those days. But looking at the way they hunted then versus now, and you say that they've adapted, do you think it's because, like any other animal, the coyotes, they do learn tactics and they get it? To me, I've heard they adapt really quick and they learn quick if you don't kill them.
Yeah, and well, I guess some people know my shooting percentages last year weren't that great. I educated a lot of dogs last year.
Okay.
In ultimately what I'm actually finding, I mean, a lot of guys, to get into this, you're starting off typically with lower end equipment. You're starting off with using lights. It's not as expensive to get into it, and after a while, the dogs are starting to wisen up with lights. So not having your light full on them, full brightness, is very important. I mean, I know a lot of guys are still running lights, and lights are still the number one seller for beginner hunters. And there's always the question, red or green, red or green.
Right. I
think ultimately it comes down to preference.
Okay.
I've seen dogs respond pretty much the same way with both colors. I think the overall in the hunting industry or the predator industry, if you're going to be nighttime hunting, red is the preferred. And it doesn't appear quite as bright, and it's on the lower end of their visual spectrum. So,
okay.
But as far as just getting out there, getting in the field, lights are a great way to go.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of tumbling through a couple of your videos here, and just you can see the lights. You guys are using some lights. The thing that stands out to me the most is you talked about getting in the middle of the field and staying out of fence rows and things. These fields, everything you're killing is like right out in the middle of an open field. It just that amazes me.
Well, it's kind of a different aspect. It's great when you can just go out in the field. And this is another question I get from a lot of farmers not farmers, deer hunters, is, are you going into my wood lots? How's this affect my deer hunting? Stuff along those lines. And I'm like, I'm not going into your wood lot. I actually prefer staying at least 200 yards away from any wood lot, period. If I'm going to try to get a coyote interested or talked into coming out to me, I want him out in a wide open field.
Right.
That changes it into more my game when they're in a wide open field. Those videos you just showed, I'm probably 700 yards from any wood lot. I mean, I'm way out away from everything. And that was using a night vision scope. And using night vision, I mentioned using lights or whatever, that there's using an infrared light. So, I mean, even our visual spectrum can't see that light. And that's huge. That makes a big difference when you're out in the field. These lights are actually from a local Michigan company, Predator Hunter Outdoors, Night Snipe Hunting Lights. He puts together a really great package for all, pros all the way down to the beginners. He really has a nice package going. But calling these coyotes out of the wood lots and getting them into your field is just an absolute challenge, and it's a lot of fun to be out and doing that.
Yeah. It just blows me away. Like I said, I can sit here and watch these videos over and over again. It's nice to see these pesky little critters going down. I tell you what, we're bumping up here on our first break. So what we'll do is we're going to step outside.
We got some questions for you.
Yeah, we got some questions for you. So when we come back, we'll run down a few questions and see if you can answer them for us.
PSE Archery has reinvented the way you buy bows.
From now on, you can make the most educated decision possible
by basing your bow choice specifically on your shooting needs and goals.
All you need to do is ask yourself, what kind of shooter am I? What do I want to achieve?
PSE will help find the right category for you.
So, what kind of shooter are you?
Find out at psearchery.com.
Welcome back. Second segment of the show. We are sitting here talking with Chris Kreiner from Portland, Michigan, talking about putting some song dogs down. I tell you what, after what's happened at our camp, I couldn't think of a better subject to be talking about right now.
It's the time to do it, right?
Yeah. Chris, I just talked to a guy up at our camp today, and they were pulling trail cam photos, and we've got a food plot that's pretty big, kind of like them fields that you're hunting there, and they were getting 4, 5, 6 coyotes in a pack together on camera on a trail cam. Is that? Yeah. Do you encounter that many coyotes at one time, or is it usually onesies, twosies, and threesies?
Typically, it's twosies and threesies.
Okay.
I would say are the most common. It was a week before Christmas. I went out and was testing out the new collar from Icotec, and that collar in that week, I called in 17 coyotes, and there was 2 groups of 4, which I was pretty impressed. That was a pretty good week.
Okay.
A lot of coyotes running around. But I would say that the most we've ever called in is 7 in one set.
Okay.
And some partners of mine, some buddies, they've called in up to 10 in one set. So, but let's just say they emptied out some ammo that particular night.
I would say so.
Absolutely.
I definitely. And you think about that to those types of numbers of what they're actually doing damage, whether it's deer, a farm that's got cattle, whatever. That's a lot of coyotes.
Yeah, it is.
So, you get that many coyotes. That's a lot of mouths to feed.
Absolutely.
So if you're seeing very low deer numbers or fawn numbers, for that matter, it's a good chance that coyotes are the big culprit there. Rabbits, they're obviously that's their number one. They go after rabbits like crazy. And then you got mice, field mice and stuff. And that's, going back to some of the equipment that we're using, what's really cool when you're using the thermal imagers, some of the videos that you have there of thermal imaging, you can see mice out to 200 yards jumping through the fields. So that's something you don't even see during the daylight with your own naked eyes.
That's cool. Well, Danny's got some questions here. We're going to keep showing some of these videos here as we answer a few of these. What do you got?
All right. Okay. So we got Charles Byram. He's tuning in from Iowa, and out there they are allowed to bait coyotes. Do you have any advice in regards to baiting, do's and don'ts, etc.?
Pretty much any carcass works as bait. Deer carcasses is number one. Here in Michigan, you can pick up roadkill and fill out a roadkill permit on the DNR's website. And I don't know if Iowa's got that same type of law or rule or not, if they allow that. But deer carcasses are usually the easiest thing to get as far as roadkill animals. And one tip or technique that a lot of bait hunters use around is either you got those alarms that you can put on your driveway. So when somebody pulls in your driveway, it gives a little ding and lets you know somebody's there. Right. I've heard of guys putting those over top of the bait pile. So then when something shows up, they can, shine. Usually they got the bait pile within a couple yards of 100 yards of their home. So they can walk on the back porch and try to shoot the coyote. Or you can use a scouting camera, and you got all your wireless scouting cameras now, and it'll send you a picture when you got something on your bait pile. That's another technique I've seen used. So there's several different ways you could try to do it. I'm not one that's very patient as far as finding yourself a bait pile and sitting on it all night. You just don't know when the coyote's going to show up. They have their own schedule, and they're going to show up whenever they want. So having a device that tells you when they're there is probably one of the more effective ways of eliminating them.
Okay. So when you go out on a set, how long do you usually set before you take off when you start calling?
Usually from the moment I start calling to the moment I leave the set's about 25 minutes.
Okay.
Back in the day when I first started coyote hunting, they were always saying if coyotes doesn't show up within the first 5 to 10 minutes, you're not likely going to get a coyote show up.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I based a lot of my earlier hunting techniques on. But the more I got into it, the more I started understanding it, I started having coyotes showing up right about the 18 to 22 minute mark.
Okay.
And so giving it that full 25 minutes, and I know guys that are giving it a full 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and sitting out there a little bit longer.
Mm-hmm.
But I've got a lot of property in Ionia, in Eaton counties. So to try to hit as much as I can in a single night, I'm usually hitting it really quick and then moving on to the next property. Don't waste a lot of time.
Okay. All right. What else you got, Dan?
All right. Dean Elliott, do you have a suggestion for an affordable night optic?
Pulsar makes some lower end optics as far as the N550. I think you can get those for right around $500 mark. And then Sightmark also makes the Photon, which is a really good night vision scope. And again, that's right around that $400 to $600 mark. So in pairing that with an aftermarket IR light, such as the Night Snipe NS550, that really helps extend your range and the visibility when you're out in the field.
What kind of range are you looking at with a setup like that? How far can you see and shoot effectively?
You could probably see and shoot well past 300 yards.
Oh, wow.
With a setup like that.
Okay.
Yeah. A good majority of the time I try to get the coyotes within 100 yards. But sometimes you just can't, and they get held up at 300 or 200. Myself, my effective range right now, I'm still trying to get my gun set up just the way I want it. My effective range is 200 yards. I would really hesitate to try to shoot a coyote at 300. I mean, I know it's a coyote. I can see it's a coyote, but I just don't feel my gun is up to the task quite yet. Or maybe it's me.
Yeah.
I haven't figured it out yet.
Gotcha.
So,
well, that, and like we were talking earlier, you don't want to educate them either.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And then, we got the big tournament coming up here next weekend. And so you don't want to, especially just before a tournament, you don't want to educate your dogs. I know most of these guys haven't touched their coyote properties in 3 to 6 months, all looking forward to this tournament. So a lot of great hunters are going to be showing up next weekend, and we're likely going to knock down quite a few coyotes.
So if you're looking for somebody to come out and take coyotes off your property, you don't want a tournament hunter is what I guess is probably the adage, because they're not going to come out till tournament time, right?
Well, it's not necessarily that. I mean, it's just some of these guys, I mean, you got certain properties that are common producers. Such one of my properties, actually, for the 2018 season, I took 6 coyotes off that property. But even after the last time I hunted it, which I think was about September, there were still another 5 to 7 coyotes that we were hearing respond to our howls. So that property in particular has got a lot of coyotes on it.
Okay.
And there's a handful of properties out there like that. So it's, you sit there and you spring, summer, you sit there, continue calling and hoping to take as many as you can off of there. But they're ultimately going to keep coming back, and you just keep going back for more.
Okay, Dan, what else you got?
Okay, Charles Byram did respond back and says, yes, he can get a tag for the roadkill, and he says thanks for the info. Let's start up here. Oh, Dan Chandler is tuning in from the deer stand, the last night of the Illinois archery season.
Hopefully he's got earbuds in.
Right. Brian Klein says, it looks like a sniper hawk light on the rifle in the background.
That is actually a Night Snipe NS550 on the rifle in the background.
Okay.
There you go. And okay, so what is your take on the effectiveness of the 204 caliber?
Actually, besides the fact that the 204 is a really light bullet, and you end up, if you're dealing with any wind whatsoever, you're going to end up with a lot of wind drift. But ultimately, the 204 is such a fast bullet. It does hit coyotes really hard, and it is a very effective round. The biggest thing is your overall range in windy conditions.
All right, cool. What calling system are you using?
Right now, I am using the Icotec Outlaw. It's a new caller that just came out from Icotec this last year. It allows for dual sounds being played at the same time. It's got a lot of really neat features. It allows the decoy, comes with the collar. which, by the way, I don't use a decoy at night. We call in a lot of owls. And when you call in the owls, they have a tendency to steal the decoys. So, yeah, a lot of guys had that issue. But, yeah, at nighttime, I run just the collar. And it comes with, if I remember correctly, like 250 sounds. Wow. And the sounds that it comes with are some of the best in the industry. J.D. Pyatt, Tony Tebby, they both make some really great sounds, and this collar comes with them already pre-installed. So you don't have to spend a lot of money and extra time buying the extra audio that you would have to if you were buying some of these other collars. So I've been really impressed with this collar so far.
So are you seeing the technology in the collars obviously increasing and getting better and better and better at fooling the coyotes?
Yes. I mean, the technology in the audio is, I think, where it's all coming from, a big part of it. The higher quality audio is going a really long way. They're using real coyotes for some of the vocals now, as opposed to in the past they were probably using a howler such as this, and they were just trying to mimic the sounds. But now we're getting real coyote sounds, and we're running them in our collars for that high resolution, and it's proving to be quite fatal.
Do you use a lot of mouth calls when you're out day or night, or vice versa?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. I always carry a reed collar with me. It's actually proven quite effective. Last year I had one of my calls freeze up on me. I shut it off thinking I was done hunting. And actually it's one of the doubles that you show the video of. And while I was sitting there messing with my collar, I couldn't get it to turn on because I had another coyote howling in a wood line at me. Mm-hmm. So since I couldn't get the collar to respond, I pulled out my reed call and I let out a howl just to let him know, hey, I'm still over here.
Right.
And it took him less than 3 minutes, and here he was at 100 yards, and I was able to shoot my second coyote on the stand. That was after I walked out and got the first one, walked back with a flashlight, walked back to my gun. He started howling in the wood line, so he didn't see me. And the 2 gunshots that I had probably 5 minutes prior taken didn't affect him at all. So that's another technique, I guess, is just because you shot the one coyote, give it a little more time. You never know when that second one might still be in the area, especially this time of year when the coyotes are pairing up.
Is that happen to be the video where you call recovery, where you're dragging the coyote back in? I see you turning and looking back.
That one there is one that Clinton took, just before Christmas, a couple weeks before Christmas, and we had called in a pair, and then I was watching with the thermal imager trying to see where the other coyote was, because he was howling still in the wood line, but he wouldn't come out.
Okay.
And so the reason Clinton kept hunching down and looking back is because there was a third coyote that came out of the wood line and wasn't sure what was going on, and so he was trying to make sure that coyote was indeed, whether he was going to come in or not. So that's why he was kind of trying to be a little stealthy.
I got you. Okay. At the beginning of that video, as soon as he starts coming back with that coyote, I noticed there's a big spot on the ground. That thermal imager is reading that spot. I don't know if it's a blood spot or if it's just the heat signature.
That's just the heat. That's just the heat signature from the animal laying there. And that's where thermal imaging has been a huge game changer for doing this nighttime hunting. It's not recommended for the first-time hunter, and the reason being is because you have to really understand the body language of the animal that's coming in. You need to be able to understand what you're looking for, whether you're looking at a fox, because fox season is not that long.
Right.
It's a pretty short season, so knowing whether you got a fox coming in, a coyote coming in, or a domestic dog is a big difference, because you don't know if the neighbor's dog might be running on the loose and might be interested in checking out what the howls are all about.
Right.
So night vision is a great way to go. It allows you to identify the animal with actual light shining back into the scope. You can definitely see what it is, and until you get that sense of understanding the body language, then you can switch into, it's recommended you could switch into your thermal vision. Thermal vision allows you more range. It allows you to see the animal coming much sooner than you could with lights. And I feel when I actually see the animal through the night vision scope, I get a little amped up. I get a little adrenaline going.
Right.
But thermal, it kind of calms me a little bit, I guess you could say. I know it's a coyote. I know it's coming in, but it allows me to really pinpoint the heat signature in that body and make sure my shot is spot on.
Gotcha.
Cool.
Well, I'll tell you what, we're bumping up here on our second break.
Got some questions still.
Some more questions coming in. And actually, I got something I want to run down with you as well. So we're going to step outside. We're going to take our next break here. When we come back, we'll continue down the Coyote Road, so to speak. So we'll be right back after this.
PSE Archery has always dominated the speed category. Now, the most revolutionary cam system ever to hit the market has perfected the shooting experience. Introducing PSE's Evolve Cam System, featuring extremely high let-off capabilities and the smoothest draw cycle in history. No other cam system has ever delivered this level of total comfort and total control. Experience PSE. Experience performance.
Welcome back, third segment of the show. We'd be remiss if we didn't talk about Hunter's Blend Coffee here real quick. The guys that help us out here in the Up-North Journal.
Which we met at the ATA in person. You
Yes,
talked about it on the show, of me not letting them sit down.
Yeah, you try to kick them away from the table. But don't forget, we got our UNJ promo code. If you guys go over to huntersblendcoffee.com and type in UNJ in the promo code and get 10% off your order. So
right.
We'd be remiss if we didn't tell you about the good folks over there.
And it tastes good on a cold day.
That's right. You know, speaking of, I'm just going to throw this out to you, Chris. When you go out in the field, do you take drinking snacks with you when you're sitting there?
We're usually not in the field long enough that we actually need them in the field, but we definitely have them in the truck for when we get back.
Okay. All right. Well, what's your go-to snack?
Jerky.
Okay.
You can't go wrong with jerky.
All right.
And since we're usually out late at night, the energy drinks are usually our go-to.
Gotcha.
But next weekend with the tournament, I think we're going to need something a little bit warmer in the truck. It's going to be cold.
Yeah, it's supposed to be. Yeah, we're supposed to hit another.
Get you some Hunter's Blend.
Another
there
clipper coming in for next weekend.
Yep.
Yeah, I think they're talking lows at night down to 4 degrees. And for all of us hunters, we're going to be out from sunset to sun up, so it's going to be really cold out there.
And that starts on Friday and runs till Sunday?
Yes, Friday night they release us at around 7:30. So we're going to have 161 teams taking off from Kalamazoo to pretty much hunt all over the state.
That's insane.
It is.
Yeah.
that's
I know there's guys that travel, there's a couple guys coming from up north, and they'll travel down here to check in, and then they travel back up north to hunt. So they're going to have some road time.
Yeah, that's going to take a little hunting time away. What time do they let you go?
About 7:30
okay.
Friday night.
Okay, all right. Well, good luck in that endeavor. You guys have fun freezing next week. And speaking of temperatures, one temperature versus another better for hunting coyotes?
This time of year, obviously, like I had mentioned earlier, they're really they need to put calories into their diet. So they're going to be hunting. So when it's this cold out, it seems like distress is going to work a little bit better for you because they need to eat to keep themselves warm. So this time of year, cold temperatures, they should respond really well. We're also into their breeding season, just getting fired up. So you're going to have a lot of pairs running together, and they're going to be aggressive to their territories. So it's going to be a combination of the two. Territorial and predatory are the two sounds that we're going to go for.
Okay. Now, you had a question there about cover sense or something, Dan?
Yeah, there's actually the first question, so I go in order so I don't lose my place here. Do you have a website for the lights you're using?
Yeah, PredatorHunterOutdoors.com. He sells pretty much everything that I've talked about here today, going from the lights all the way down to the collars to your thermal and night vision optics.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so then, yes. What cover sense or attractants are you using in your setups?
Well, ultimately, I pretty much tell people none, because you're not going to be able to fool a coyote's nose. I haven't seen anything out there yet that can fully cover your human odor to the point where a coyote is not going to detect you. You might be able to use some stronger cover scents such as skunk or maybe red fox, and it'll help mask you just a little bit. But ultimately, you hunt the wind. So if you got a scenario where the wind is blowing right into the woodlot where you expect the coyotes to come from, just don't hunt it. move on to the next property, because all you're going to do is you're going to educate them, and they're not going to respond. They're going to stay into the wood line. They're going to detect your wind, and they're not going to come out. So I always pick properties based on the wind and hunt just based on that. I don't use any cover scents. I don't shower in scentless soap or anything like that like I do deer hunting. I just go out there right after work and I'll hunt. So
your approach is really key, the approach and the setup, getting in and out undetected for that scent.
Right.
I got you.
Okay. Actually, that's kind of a cool lead into the next question. What's the best way to figure out what area to hunt? Drive around until you hear them, or use some kind of locator, use a fire truck siren?
Actually, funny to say that. I went out with my buddy Cody Pierce here the other night, and we called and we called and we called. I think we were in that set for about a half an hour. Nothing was responding. And then a fire truck went by, and the woods just lit up. It's like, come on. So this goes into my whole, coyotes can be frustrating, just very frustrating when they're not responding to you, but you get a fire truck coming by and then they light off. So, but typically as far as locating a coyote or the areas that they come into, what I look at is the aerial maps. Look at the wood lot, try to understand the topography and see if it's an area that might be hold a lot of coyotes. And from that, I go out and I'll use a locator howl, and which is, like I said, just usually just a reed call. Give them a quick howl on this, and if they're there, they typically respond. You're going to get nights where even if they are there, they're just going to be tight-lipped and just not respond. But typically, I go around, I check my properties. If I get response, I mark the property and wait for a good wind, and then I'll hunt it.
So next time he's going to have a big red light and a fire engine siren with in case they're not lighting up.
Exactly.
Actually, some of these callers come with a siren on them.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, they come with, so you can just park on the side of the road, hit the siren, and see if some coyotes respond.
That's crazy. Well, back, 4, 5, 6 years ago here in Michigan, we actually had a wolf hunting season. Did you partake in that at all?
I didn't. I missed that one. And I know that there's talks again of trying to get that back on the agenda to start allowing a wolf season. I think we're still waiting on the feds to release the hold on that, but it would be great to have that opportunity again. I know it's always a controversial topic. You got a lot of people that really like the wolf population, but then again, you got the deer hunters who are not seeing any deer in the UP because of the wolf population. So right. I do believe a wolf season is necessary. You do have to keep the predatory animals in check.
Right. Well, the reason I was kind of going down that road is Brian Kleins was asking, he's in Wyoming, he says, is there any pointers for hunting wolves or calling wolves? And I didn't know if you had any experience in that at all.
Unfortunately, I don't. I think wolves are such a pack animal, and they move so much. Granted, I would imagine that some of the concepts would be similar to coyotes, but I think they're taking down much bigger animals. They're going after full-size deer, full-size elk, and I'm not quite sure the technique that would be used for that. I do have a buddy that lives in the Wyoming, Utah area, and he does some wolf hunting and some cougar hunting and stuff like that, but I've never really heard the absolute best way to take them.
Okay.
So if we do have a season, I bet you Chris will be up there doing it.
There you go. Yeah, you got it at your place. So.
There's a lot of guys that are going to be after them if they open up a season again. So.
I tell you what, the last time, I think when they did have a season, they wanted to kill like between 40, 45, and they got roughly about half.
Right. And everybody went nuts.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But
well, speaking of controversy, you know how I feel about these the AR platform guns. I love them, and I notice you've got one behind you. So let's stir up some people's dander, and let's talk about the difference between you using a semi-automatic rifle versus the bolt action, the other one. We kind of talked about this a little bit before the show.
Yeah, well, ultimately, I started with the bolt gun, and if you can run a bolt really fast, it's not bad, but it still takes you off target for that quarter second, half a second it takes you to run the bolt. And being able to use an AR platform, or I mean, ultimately, the AR platform gets a lot of controversy, but ultimately, it's just a semi-automatic rifle. I mean, you got your Ruger 1022s. You know, that's a semi-automatic rifle, and you can't shoot this any faster than you can shoot any other semi-automatic rifle. But what it does allow me to do as a nighttime hunter is get back on target faster.
Right.
So I get to squeeze off the first shot, and then if for whatever reason I happen to miss, then I touch off another one, but I'm able to maintain my lead. I don't get a lot of barrel jump with the semi-automatic rifles either. So you're able to keep your crosshairs level with the animal. And I believe there's possibly a video even where my buddy Clinton misses a shot, and I follow up with and take it with my shot. So being able to do quick follow-ups allows you an opportunity to get more animals. But ultimately, the AR platform, it's because it's got all these accessories on it is why it's got so many. It's so controversial. Yeah. It's no different than any other hunting rifle.
Well, and I got to imagine too, with being having Picatinny rails on them, it allows you're mounting your sights, you're mounting your optics or your lights. You've got a bipod, the slings. You know, I'm kind of running through the photos here now that you sent us, and you know, everyone I see, you guys are shooting. Actually, I'm going to put one up right now. You're standing and shooting off bipods.
Yeah, they're tripods.
Tripods, actually, tripod. Yeah.
Yeah, essentially your camera tripods. The blue one here with my AR on it, that's a 33-pound rated tripod, and it works really great. You can stand out in the middle field. It gives you a good solid rest, and that's important, especially, I mean, even if the coyote's 30, 40 yards away, having a good solid rest still makes a big difference. I mean, I know I can't shoot freehand to save my life, so if I didn't have the tripod, I wouldn't be able to make it work.
Yeah. Plus, it gives you that it gives you that ability to, like you said, the follow-up shot with the tripod. It's you don't have to reset yourself.
Right, very solid platform.
Yep.
And as you can see, also, one of the images you just showed, it allows us hand-free use. I mean, we can let go of our gun and we can scan with our thermal imagers to look for the coyotes and not have to worry about our gun falling off of a bipod type rest or
falling off your lap,
a monopod, or off your lap. So it offers a lot of opportunity.
We talked a little bit about the semi-automatic versus the bolt action. Is there a caliber that you prefer one versus the other, or are they both set up basically with the same caliber?
The AR is a .223 caliber rifle, centerfire rifle, and ultimately I like it. The recoil is very low, and it's very effective. But my ultimate problem with that weapon is just the effective range. I know guys I've shot coyotes out past 300 yards with a .223, but just my particular setup right now, my effective range ultimately is not much over 200. I'd really have a hard time squeezing off a shot past that. But my bolt gun behind me is 22-250, and with the exception of the fact that it's a bolt gun, I love it. 22-250 hits coyotes very, very hard. Rarely do they get up and move after they're hit with that gun. The bullet is the same size. It's just flying so much faster and hitting so much harder that it just shocks their system and they drop right there. Whereas the 223's, 500 feet per second slower, maybe even a little bit slower than that. And it just doesn't have that same punch when it hits them. So, and then plus the 22-250, I feel comfortable with that out past 300, possibly even 400 yards.
So you've talked about the gun. Now, Charles is commenting here. With the full moon, I'm trying to talk myself into going out tonight, but the -6 degrees thing is doing a pretty good job of talking me out of it.
Come on, Charles.
They talked me out of it last night.
Okay, I was just about to ask you. Like tonight is the moon eclipse, a full moon. Do you look for like the weather types coming in? Are you looking for specific weather?
Ultimately, I'm looking for pressure. The barometric pressure seems to be the biggest role player when it comes to calling these coyotes in. I'm noticing, super low pressure. Seems like nothing's on its feet. Deer, raccoons, possum, they're nowhere to be seen out in the fields. And then you get there, around 30 millibars, you get a lot more activity, a lot more animals moving, and then you get upwards of around 31 millibars. And I've noticed, I don't know what other hunters have noticed, but I've noticed that when the pressure's too high, kind of a similar scenario happens. Not a lot of animals on their feet. Maybe they were on their feet earlier in the evening, and then they started bedding down by the time I get out into those fields. I'm not sure what it is, but it seems like I don't see as many coyotes on those particular nights either. So pressure plays a huge role in monitoring and taking notes of every single hunt that you do and what you see, what you don't see, what are the animals doing, gives you kind of a chart to go by and being able to see what could happen the next time you hunt that area. Just because you don't hear or see coyotes that first time out, doesn't mean that they're not there. Just don't give up on that area. But another thing to kind of go into that is don't overhunt an area either. Talking about pressuring the animals, using lights, happen to miss one. I typically don't hunt a property more than once, maybe twice a month. But I cycle through all my properties and then I move on. And then next month I'll, hit it again. But, I left a lot of smart ones out there last year, so I'm not sure what to expect this year.
Well, I tell you what, we're getting close here on our last break. So let's step outside. We take our last break. See what time we got left coming back. I got another question I want to run by you, and I think it's going to lead to some good discussion here. So we're going to step outside. We'll be right back after this.
Acceleration is part of PSE's DNA. PSE pioneered the speed movement. Now they've developed the vapor category to help you find the most powerful bows on the market to fit you.
High speed equates to intense power and building the momentum you need to be successful. Are you a vapor shooter? Find out at psearchery.com.
Welcome back. Last segment of the show. Sitting here talking with Chris Kreiner from over here in mid-Michigan, and we're talking coyotes today. We've talked a lot about your setup, how you hunt, the different equipment you use, but I've got to imagine when you go to a property and you drive up and all of a sudden you start unloading firearms out of the truck and somebody drives by, that's gotta signal something in somebody's mind that doesn't know what's going on that causes some problems. Do you ever encounter issues out there on the roads or in the fields?
Rarely, but it does happen, especially when we use lights more often. You get people driving by and they see bright red lights out in the field scanning back and forth, and it kind of raises some suspicion. Some buddies of mine, they had the sheriff's department or state troopers show up. They got to follow up on a call, and when they follow up, the guys, they're very, let's just say, every time I've run into a law enforcement officer in the field, they've been very professional. They actually ask questions. They're very interested in what we're doing. They're interested in our setups. So it just gets a little dialogue going. But recently, it was, I think, the first week of December, Clinton and I, we hit a piece of property. We got all the way out in the field. We got set up. We started calling, had coyotes responding, and then we noticed a car's headlights. This car backed into a driveway after it stopped and looked at my truck, backed into a driveway and had the headlights shining right out in the field. And we're like, what in the world are they doing? Mm-hmm. So it was a matter of about 5 minutes later, another car showed up, and it was a sheriff deputy shining his spotlight on my truck, and then he flipped on his lights. And I guess this is one of the tips that I would say to anybody that is out in the fields hunting. Carry the phone number for your central dispatch. Okay. That's been huge for me. When I noticed this sheriff deputy turn on his lights, I quickly got on the phone with dispatch. I said, hey, this is so-and-so. I got a sheriff deputy sitting at my truck on this road. Does he need to talk with me? And so dispatch just let me know, I'll call you back if he needs to talk to you. And it was literally 30 seconds later, dispatch called me back saying, nope, deputy's all set. You're good to continue hunting. And deputy shut off his lights, and then he went and talked to the person that was at the door, in the driveway. So I think ultimately what happened is that particular residence, they saw us getting our weapons out of the vehicle. And so when it's 1 o'clock in the morning, and you're getting these weapons out of a vehicle, it can raise some red flags and concerns. So I don't fault these landowners or these neighbors for calling, the law enforcement. I try to keep my number wide open for law enforcement to contact me in case these type of calls do come through. But now there's so many people out here in the fields at night anymore that it's hard for them just to call me every time they get a call, because there could probably be 20 different people in Ionia County out hunting at any given moment. So It'd be pretty monotonous. But it's definitely an issue that can arise, but ultimately people just got to be hunters, especially don't go out there with an attitude thinking that you're King Tut because you're in a farmer's field in the middle of the night. You're just going to, cause issues. Be professional, be courteous to your law enforcement officers and especially neighbors in the local area.
Yeah, that goes a long way. I mean, you got to be an advocate for hunters, and if you present a bad, situation, and people are going to get a negative attitude towards it. So
you're likely to lose the farm too. I mean, we're asking these landowners to give us permission to hunt their land. So if there's a negative problem going on in the area, then you're gonna run into issues, and you're likely going to lose that farm. So being professional and courteous goes a very long way.
Absolutely.
Well, your hunting buddy, Clinton Taylor, is that him?
Yes.
Well, he says you're looking good.
Appreciate it, Clinton.
And then he says, yeah, you guys got a great relationship with the officers. Yes. And then he also says that in deer season, too, everyone thinks the worst that's going to happen, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, and ultimately during deer season, we do a lot of hunting in October. I mean, coyote hunting's actually pretty much taken over my deer hunting passion. I get out deer hunting just a handful of times, but ultimately I'm saving my energy to get out at night to coyote hunt. So we got a few farms that do allow us to coyote hunt during deer season. And it's funny because we get out into a field, we're usually walking within 30 to 50 yards of deer, and they're not concerned about our presence whatsoever. If a coyote comes in and we take a shot, those deer go maybe 100 yards, and then they go back to feeding. So, I mean, our presence in the fields it really doesn't affect the deer a ton. But going back to what Clinton was probably making note of, is we had an issue with a guy in October where he thought he owned all the land in the area, and he rose a big stink because of the one night we called in a pair of coyotes. Buddy Keith Thalen, he shot one, and so we hunted that same field about 2 weeks later, and this time Clinton was with me, Keith was with me again. And a couple of guys pulled up, and they were very aggressive, and they weren't very friendly. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, the next day, I started getting phone calls saying, so-and-so is saying you're poaching off this land. Mm. And so when that type of stuff starts flying around, you nip it in the bud as quick as you can. So I went around, I started talking to a couple other landowners in the area, and then I ultimately found out who was spreading that rumor. I went and I talked to them and let them know, like, we are flat out coyote hunters. There's no interest in us shooting deer, period. And so that made it really tough. It was a tough weekend. Obviously I know the law enforcement officers, the conservation officers in Ionia County, so one has been, goodness, I think I've known him for about 6 years. And so I called him up and spoke with him about it, and he goes, oh, I know who it is. So he's had issues in the past. So with these people calling on other neighbors, accusing them of trespassing and stuff like that. So ultimately it came down to, I did what I can, talked with the person that was talking about me and, cleared the air, so to speak. And, that seemed to kind of disappear. So it does make it tough. When you got guys that are deer hunting, they hear gunshots in the field. Obviously, poaching is a huge issue statewide. I mean, it's been really tough, especially during deer season. These guys hear gunshots, they're thinking the worst, which ultimately, honestly, if it was near my deer hunting property, I would probably think the same way. So I can't blame them. But going out there and flat out accusing somebody of that, but not calling law enforcement, I got an issue with that. If there is question of any poaching going on, call up law enforcement, get them out there and start investigating. I've invited the law enforcement and the COs in Ionia County to join me on multiple occasions. We haven't quite worked out the details yet, but they're more than welcome to join me at any time while we're out in the fields coyote hunting. And
communication, that goes a long way, no matter what the situation is, to breaking down barriers, keeping everybody safe, but also alleviating any problems. But we had a comment here, and actually I was going to ask you this, but it got brought up by Brian Kleins. He says when he's out hunting late at night or early in the morning, he has a sign on his truck that says coyote hunting with his name and phone number. Do you guys do anything like that?
That's actually, I think I made a post about regarding the sheriff deputy stopping out at my truck. I made a post about it here about a month ago, and somebody did bring that up. Like, hey, I got a magnetic sign that I stick on the side of my truck when I'm about ready to start a hunt. Mm-hmm. So that way then they know coyote hunting is in progress. And so that was a great idea. And we haven't gone to those steps yet, but I think it's definitely in the future. So.
Okay. All right. Well, we'd be remiss a little bit if we didn't talk a little bit here right before we let you go about these photographs. You guys are taking some phenomenal photographs, especially at night.
Thank you.
What's kind of your setup there? Do you take portable lights with you, or do you have?
No. All I'm using is a Nikon D5100, so it's kind of your run-of-the-mill DSLR, just not a high-end one, not a low-end one, just So, and I've got a couple different lenses for it, so it allows me to change out the lens. But my lighting ultimately comes from a little flashlight. Okay. So it's a long exposure that I set my camera for. So I set it for a long exposure, and then I just hit it with the flashlight really quick. I paint the scene, so to speak, with the flashlight. So I pretty much have to tell my subjects. Of course, obviously the coyotes aren't going to move much, but I have to tell my subjects to sit really, really still, don't move. Right. So as I paint the scene with a flashlight, it kind of gives that shadowing effect of the lighting coming from the other side of the person. And and then doing the long exposure gives you these starry backgrounds, and you get a little bit of the skyscape, I guess you could say. Right. And it's been just a lot of fun doing that and playing around with it. We get a lot of comments on that ability that we're able to have.
Yeah, that is. It's really cool to be able to see the stars and everything, and the color. Actually, the colors are so vivid. That's what it blows my mind at how well you guys are getting some photos at night. That's incredible. Yeah, we're having a lot of fun with it. I would say so far, Cody and Clinton have been, a couple of my main models, and they're patient enough with me when I'm running the camera. I'm like, oh, I messed up a little bit on that one. Let's redo it. Right. I mean, usually, some people think is as quick as just taking a picture and moving on. No. But to do the setup that I'm doing right now. Clinton can correct me if I'm wrong, but I want to say it eats up probably about 30 to 45 minutes of our night by the time I'm done taking some of these shots.
Well, he's commenting that you guys use magic wands. But then now I've found out the truth of the real story that you're trying to tell me. It's actually from April Kreiner with the wife's camera.
Yeah, she just busted you.
Yeah, she busted me. Yeah, we actually bought that for her years ago. And I don't think she's spent a whole heck of a lot of time with it. It's kind of been in my possession a lot. So
taking the wife's camera. Okay, I see how this rolls.
But honey, it's for you.
What are you going to do?
Yeah, right.
She's got a good camera, better than mine.
And Clinton's got a good point here. He says that pictures are a great way to respect the animal, enjoy the hunt. It's much, much more worth the time that it takes.
Yeah, we do enjoy taking the photos. It adds a lot to the memory of the hunt, and we can go back to it. So,
well, I tell you what, we've got about 2 or 3 minutes here. You talk about respect for the animal and everything. When you get done with the hunt, are you selling pelts? What are you guys doing with the pelts? Are you taking them and getting them tanned, or is there a market for that?
There is a market if you can find a fur buyer. Fur buyers are kind of few and far between. You have to drive a ways to find them. And there is a value to the coyote pelts. And some of these fur buyers will take them whole, so you don't even have to mess with trying to finish them as far as scraping the meat, skinning them, scraping the hides. It's real easy to just take them the whole animal and be done with it. So during this time of year, yes, there's definitely a value to the hides. Now, when we're hunting late spring and summer, and even early fall, the hides don't have a lot of value.
Right.
So during that time of year, We're strictly out there for damage control and out there to reduce the population. So, but during this time of year, yeah, there's definitely value to it.
Okay, so those times of the year when the fur's not prime, that's where you're hunting these farms where farmers call you in and you're trying to get them off of their livestock.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll tell you what, we're bumping up here towards the end of the podcast time, so we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. We'll stay on the live stream for just a few minutes, but Chris, we really appreciate you taking some time and sitting down with us today and talking a little bit about your experiences out in the field.
If there's any way, if anybody wants to find you, see you, what you're doing, how do they get a hold of you?
The best way to get a hold of me is just through Facebook. Shoot me over a friend request and shoot me over a message. You can ask me any questions through private messaging. And, talk coyotes. I get lots of questions, and I definitely love talking coyotes. Thanks for having me, guys. Really appreciate it.
Hey, no problem. It's been fun. It's something we don't do.
No, I've piddled at it, and I've shot one, and that was years ago. But I've done a little trapping as well, but I've yet to catch my first coyote in a foothold trap. So one day, I say one day, but I got to get back into it. But thanks for hanging with us here for an hour on the show, and that'll do it for this episode of the Up North Journal podcast. We'll talk to you guys again next week.
And don't forget, you can catch us in syndication at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on goodtalkradio.com. This episode was brought to you by
PSE Archery,
Scentlock Technologies,
Scent Blocker,
Rambo Bikes,
Hunter's Blend Coffee,
Limb Walker Game Calls,
Stanislawski Releases,
Copper John Sights,
Easy Cut Outdoor Products,
Fourth Arrow Camera Arms,
Wind Sense Hunting Sense,
X-Stand Tree Stands,
Spot Shooters,
and Twisted Mind Bowstrings.
Thanks for listening, and join us again here next week. Until then, remember, as we always like to say, if you're out on the water or in the woods, shoot straight and be safe. Until next week on the Up North Journal.